Endogenous growth yield 20. Economies advance through the efficiency of productivity and the increases that result. Many variables are used to explain economic growth in models which attempt to describe reality. These variables develop from internal growth or are assumed through external simplifications. Endogenous growth is most noticeable in economic growth due to innovation. Throughout this presentation, we will look through the details of endogenous and examples in engineering and science.
Old models. Neoclassical economics relies on dated principles which were used to explain economic growth. The theory states that economic growth is the result of three factors: labor, capital, and technology. Early indigenous growth theories use simplified assumptions and variables. It urges that improvements in productivity can be tied directly to faster innovation and more investments in human capital from governments and private sector institutions. For the slow swan model, it predicts that in the long run, economies converge to their steady state equilibrium, that permanent growth is achievable only through technological progress. And finally, the AK model predicts that country long-run growth rate will depend on economic factors such as thrift and efficiency of resource allocation.
Endogenous growth theory states that economic growth is a result of investments in human capital leading to innovation, expansion of knowledge, and technological improvements. The theory states that long-term economic growth rate is on the basis of internal or endogenous factors to the economy and not external processes. That improvements to knowledge, innovation, and human capital lead to technological advancements in productivity. A simple example of the theory would be when governments give incentives and subsidies to businesses to research and develop new and improved products, or to upscale their workers through training workshops.
Economic models can simulate reality to simplified mathematical form, which allows insight into the growth of economies. For the Solo model of economic growth, its production function is a Cobb-Douglas type, a common method used to find output. Many variables are time-dependent. Population grows over time and capital increases. Technological progress in the Solo model is exogenous and is not accurate in explaining economic growth. Output elasticity is the change of an output divided by the change of an input. Being less than 1 describes diminishing marginal returns to capital accumulation as the output is smaller. The first step in endogenizing the model is setting the elasticity equal to 1, allowing us to derive the AK model production function. You may notice that the population is lost. In steady state, when the investment equals the depreciation on the output and capital curve, human capital can be solved for and added to the model. The steady state growth rate now has a geometric average of the different savings rates as opposed to a single savings rate. The endogenous growth model by Paul Romer also has a modified production function of similar form. Two new variables are introduced. AL is the fraction of the labor force in research and development, so 1 minus AL is in goods production. AK is the fraction of the capital in research and development. The production function accounts for these new percentages. The production of new ideas is also dependent on these factors. For capital accumulation, the depreciation is set to 0 and the savings rate is constant. The capital accumulation equation with exogenous savings rate can have the substituted production function with variable to hold the savings rate multiplied by the fractions 1 minus AK and 1 minus AL. Growth rate GK can then be found by dividing capital accumulation by capital. Growth rate of technology GA can be found using the same method on technology accumulation by dividing by technology. Growth rate of capital and technology derivatives can be modeled with found equilibrium at the curve of GA and GK being 0. During World War II, the Axis and Allied powers were constantly attempting to outproduce each other with new technology in the war. The Germans developed the V-1 and V-2 rocket, the latter being the first to reach space back in 1944. After the war, Europe was divided, and the Soviets had tensions with the United States. A race to produce more technology needed to explore beyond Earth ensued, and more emphasis was placed on the education and training of scientists and engineers. Scientists who worked for the Germans were imported to aid in rocket development, and massive progress was made. In the pursuit of new technology needed to reach space, discoveries in rocket, satellite, and computer technology were the foundation to many products used widespread today. All this technology improvement increased the economic growth of the United States. For the primitive computers used in early spacecraft, new technology had to be made and more powerful electronics were manufactured. Engineers from MIT used the integrated circuit to solve these issues. In 1962, 100% of the purchases of the circuit belonged to the government, but by 1965 that dropped by 28%, leading new players into the market taking advantage of technological improvements. To build on this, by 1965 there were 20 times more integrated circuits in the market. It has been found that research and development spending have 7 times increase in gross national income over 18 years and a 43% rate of return. Numerous positive externalities came as a result in employment and consumer products.
Car manufacturers have actually joined the race for the development of electric vehicles. They invest a lot of money in development of startups, conclude agreements with each other, open innovation funds, etc. The number of players include many newcomers. What do electric car manufacturers expect? Success is far from being guaranteed. The Head of Spain says we have future and we have patience. It will be difficult, but we'll have to move forward. State support can help boost the industry a lot. China has been subsidizing the construction of electric vehicle factories, and innovative development since the beginning of development of the industry. This helped companies involved in the race of electric car industry to attract additional investments. China already has the infrastructure for self-driving cars due to the government initiative to build 800,000 public charging stations. All electric car market is already bigger, and its leadership is rapidly expanding. Electric cars are not just a story about ecology, but about deeper engineering in various fields, about large-scale optimization, which requires a digital transformation, and this applies to several important segments of the global economy at once. The era of oil will continue, although the volume, consumption, and distribution to consumers will be totally different. After all, vehicles that go to electricity are major consumers of petrol and products. Oil consumption will be reduced by 10%. The popularization of electric vehicles will change the transport industry of several segments adjacent to it. The spread of electric vehicles and the emergence of large number of radically new players in the auto market must lead to a significant paradigm shift in both B2B and B2C segments, which will lead to rapid growth of new services in various infrastructure segments, including smart home and smart cities. Of course, the development of everything related to digital transformation will require new computing power, updating telecommunication infrastructure, and new integration tasks. Environmental friendliness is the most obvious advantage of electric vehicles, and as it can be seen from the surveys, the most sought after feature. Indeed, the carbon footprint during the operation of electric cars is practically zero, while non-ecological nature of gasoline diesel engines can be felt even with your nose.
There are plenty of different ways biomedical engineering has improved medically. There are two of them that I'm going to be talking about today, and the first one is going to be transdermal patches, and they're utilized as a strategy to break nicotine addiction or any addiction in general. Upgrades in the structure, material, and delivery mechanism has improved the variety of different applications it can perform. An example of that was discovered by a scientist at Nanyang Technological University in Singapore, where the patches is loaded up with a drug that assists with battling weight. These mixtures are delivered through many biodegradable microneedles in the fix that rarely harms the skin or irritates it, as the needle will break down and the medication is gradually delivered into the body. And second is wearing devices, which are gadgets that are flexible, waterproof, and stretchable. If you think about it, it's only gadgets, but they turn out to be way more than gadgets, and they're more multifunctional than we think, and they can screen various well-being boundaries, for example, pulse rate and blood pressure.
Biomedical engineering consolidates medication and designing to work on the nature of medical care through imaginative clinical gadgets and cycles. Most biomedical specialists are utilized by drug organizations, logical, innovative work organizations, firms that fabricate clinical gear and supplies, and associations that produce navigational, estimating, electroclinical, and control instruments. Biomedical designing is an astonishing profession field that pioneers numerous clinical leap forwards. Biomedical engineering produces a middle yearly compensation of $85,620 in 2016, as per the U.S. Department of Labor Statistics. On the low end, biomedical engineering produced a 25th percentile pay of $65,700, which means 75% acquired more than this sum. The 75th percentile pay is $107,850, which means 25% produced more in 2016, and 21,300 individuals were utilized in the US as biomedical engineers in the year of 2016.
Limitations. Conditional convergence in economic growth is not explained by a theory. Lack of empirical evidence of the mechanisms of the growth rather than only outlining the outcomes with accuracy.
The endogenous growth model expands previous models by adding complexity in endogenous variables and creating a better basis to describe economic growth. It has been seen that technological development, due to investment in human capital, has direct implications on the rate of economic growth, seen through examples provided in science and engineering industries. As all economic models, they are not perfectly sequential with reality, because the complexity makes it impossible to account for every variable that affects the economy, but reasonable estimations can be made